Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 63rd episode of the NTS Podcast. I'm very lucky today to be joined by the man with the most intimidating Twitter handle, and in I think all of the League of Legends scene, if I may say so myself. Joined by Gaaloul. Gaaloul, how's it going? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It is an honor to be here.
Good stuff. And why don't we even start off with that? Where did that name come from? Obviously, for those listening, on audio platforms, Gaaloul is like your sort of ID that you go by.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Twitter handle Armoured Dragon. Whereabouts did that come from?
Well, I used to play a game called Spyro when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be very interested in Yu-Gi-Oh cards as well. So I kind of made up my own superhero when I was like 7 years old one day. And I was like, yeah, I'm the Armored Dragon. And I just kind of stuck with it. So
Dude, I had pictured it being like a Call of Duty clown or something. Because when I was kind of looking back at some of the previous teams and things you played for, I guess it was maybe a team that you'd sort of put together, but it was like the Armored Brothers or something, wasn't there? And there's like one or two other people that have sort of taken similar names.
Get this. Basically, yeah, that's kind of what happened. It was a Yu-Gi-Oh card called Armed Dragon, and I had a friend come over once. So basically, when I was 13, I got to high elo. This was back in season 3.
Mm-hmm.
And there was someone from Germany who I used to do a queue with, who was a lot older than me, and we became really good friends. And he wanted me to play in Germany, so he wanted to bring me from Tunisia to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And he flew over to Tunisia, and he had friends in SK, and he was like, look, you're going to become the next superstar. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And it never really happened because, well, I was 13. Mm-hmm. You can't really just go up to your parents as a 13-year-old like, hey, you know what, peace out, I'm going to Germany.
Germany wants me to move in with him.
Yeah, and I was back in season 3 as well, so like esports wasn't, it was starting to grow, but it was not at the level that it currently is now.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that guy, in the end, we ended up just making the team Armored Brothers. He was an Umumu OTP, so he just named himself Armored Umumu. And we just made a team, and yeah, that's how it started.
Cool. Yeah, so it's kind of good to sort of start with that kind of thing then, sort of looking back at some of the earlier days in your career. And I was just kind of looking through, as we always do when we get a new guest, basically just run through the Leaguepedia and see what you've been up to. And one thing that always, whenever I see a player that's played in these, it always intrigues me, those old like amateur world championships where it's like only ERL players and stuff are allowed to play in. I think you actually played in it a few times as well. Probably one of
the IeSF.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yes.
Probably one of
those were
most appeared players. I always wonder how, even just like logistically, those come about, because it's obviously not like there's clearly not like or maybe there is. It didn't look like there would be like a team that would fund it. Like how does that actually work? How do you end up getting on a team for that, and who even puts that sort of thing together?
The IeSF was every Tunisian League of Legends player's dream in like 2014, I think, 15 till I think it stopped at like 2018.
Yeah.
Everyone in Tunisia, the only, place they wanted to go to is the IeSF. And I was one of those players. So in 2015, the Tunisian Association of Gamers, they were in contact with the IeSF, and they hosted qualification tournaments. And, this is back when I was 15, and I played, and we barely made it through. We won, and then flew over to Korea.
Wow. What was it like then? So, because obviously you get there and you're playing against like, well, I don't think you had them in your groups every time, from what I saw, but like you get against like more or less like Korean prodigies, really. Like when you go through, and most of them end up pro, most of them end up playing in the LCK. So is it even like do you get that one to go there? Do you get the boot camp at all or anything like that?
What happened was I was very motivated. Now, I was at the time living in Tunisia, and the mindset in Tunisia was not the way that I believed it should be, because there are so many great players in Tunisia.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is they grow up in an environment where they're constantly told that they're not good enough and that they can't succeed. So they end up going with that mindset, even in things such as League of Legends. So I wanted to make a change. And what happened was, in that tournament, no one had any sort of hope of winning. So it was me and another player
Mm-hmm.
who believed that we could win. And the three other players were like, there's no way we're going to make it. It's impossible. And I really did try my best, and my teammate tried my best. And after that year, I went home and I was like, you know what? I want to make a change. I don't want people to feel this way, to feel like there's no hope, like there's no way that they can win. There's no way that they can compete with people from abroad.
Mm-hmm.
So I made another team, and then I made another team, and I just kept on trying my best to find the right team which could compete in the IeSF. And that was my dream for around 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
And yeah, it was crazy.
When
We
you say
had
that, like, there's like a lot of players over there that yeah, maybe if it was mindset and things could maybe make it. Because I remember, and this is like a kind of slightly off topic, but it will kind of sort of come back around. But I remember watching an interview with Yamato Cannon, and I think it was at a point where like NA players were like complaining about ping or something. And I saw like in this interview he did, I think it was probably quite recent, where he basically said, "Oh well, I know about players in like Tunisia and other sort of North Africa, Middle East and sort of thing, that play on way more ping than like the NA people do in LA, and play like you obviously would have done, play on probably 150, 200 ping over to EU West and are a high level." And he obviously ended up at one point, I think you had a tournament where he actually was doing some coaching with you, right? So clearly the player base is there. Do you think it's time that there was actual a better server to play on for those kind of players? Because clearly it's a scene that has a talent pool there.
Well, definitely. So when I first started playing League, I played on a laptop. I didn't even have a mouse. I played on a trackpad. I had like 20 FPS. I played on like 120 ping every single game, and I still hit D1. So ping is important, but you can succeed regardless of having issues with your ping. So most players in Tunisia, they play with around 70, 80 ping, which is considered pretty decent if it's stable.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the issue is instability or packet loss in Tunisia specifically. But there are players who play in Saudi Arabia, who play in Kuwait, who play in Egypt, who play with like 120 ping, 130 ping. And they still do get high elo. There's a player called Rust who just got like challenger with 120 ping every single game as an 80 carry. So I'm not sure why Riot hasn't made any moves. We've seen very clearly that there is the viewership. I think Lone Nexus surpassed 20,000 viewers on the finals of their tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the good players. They've got the player base. There are a lot of challenger players from MENA. So I'm not really sure what's going on. I'm not sure when it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will try to do is provide the opportunity to any player from this region to help them with the contacts needed to participate in other tournaments until then.
Yeah. So was that part of the reason? Because when I sort of went through and looked at the different teams you played on as well, there were times where you'd maybe had a split in an ERL or played a qualifier here, or a little tournament there, but then you sort of seem to keep going back to the to the sort of Tunisian tournaments, Arabian Cups, and things like that. Was that something, as like you say, maybe like a personal thing you wanted to help the scene, or rather than just kind of make that effort only in the ERLs?
Well, yeah. Even after I lost that opportunity when I was 13,
Mm-hmm.
I did have a lot of other opportunities. So in 2015, whilst I was participating in the IeSF, in the beginning of the Turkish scene, I had an offer to play in Turkey. And, you know, I could have, but there was a part of me that was so connected to all the people that I've met in Tunisia. And I really did want to help out the scene, and I did want to help the scene grow. So I decided not to play, and I decided to just stay in Tunisia and to help other Tunisians improve and get better at the game, and try my best to provide them with opportunities. And I did this quite a few times. So even when I played in the Turkish scene the first time, I think I had a pretty good split considering the players that I played against. And I had another opportunity to play. I was invited by another team, and I decided not to. And it was the same thing when I played in the EBL. So there is a big part of me that is very connected to the Tunisian scene. And but I think now I've realized that the best way that I can help is by inspiring others through my own success. Now, I'm playing in the UKEL. I can't really talk about success, right? Because right now I haven't proven anything to anyone. And I'm going to try my absolute best. It doesn't mean that I'm going to succeed, but I will try my best. And whether I succeed or not, hopefully I might be able to inspire someone else who might succeed in my place. So that's my goal.
Cool. Well, it sounds like even like just getting the exposure for that scene. Like even myself, I barely knew that there was that many tournaments and things that happen over there, and there was such a player base until we get you on as a guest, do some research. You actually see there's a lot there. It's just not something people really know about or really know that that talent's there to even tap into. Before we kind of get on to joining the UKEL, then there was sort of a couple of times here and there where you sort of dipped your toes a little bit into the UK scene, like I said, like little qualifiers and Forge of Champions back in the day and things like that. How come it was maybe a bit more in the UK with some of the other leagues? Is it just you maybe knew some people in the UK leagues that you're friends with or something like that? How did that come about?
Well, at the end of the day, I was born in London and I grew up here, and there is a part of me which is very connected to the UK in terms of how I grew up and just the culture. In the end, I'm in London right now because I grew up here. I could have lived in any other country if I wanted to. I was thinking of living in Canada or in Turkey or in America, but I decided to live in the UK because that's where I grew up. When I walk out and I just walk around, I just feel a sense of nostalgia. And I'm playing right now in the UK scene because I want to connect more to the UK community and to kind of get to know people better here.
Nice. Well, one sort of UK connection you had then that was quite recent, even before NerdRage, I'd say was the short time on Team Singularity. Obviously, it's not actually a UK org, but Torok was the coach and still is, friend of the podcast. How did that come about for you joining them? So, for a bit of context, Team Singularity, who are still in the NLC now and doing a lot better now, but they basically after their first split, I think it was last summer, had basically been like rock bottom, had been pretty awful for most of the split, and then you stepped in sort of towards the end, and things started to pick up a little bit, and then it went into a relegation series that I think you played in every game, and then they obviously stayed in the NLC. So yeah, how did that come about? Was that something? Did you know Torok, and maybe he'd asked, or was it another player that recommended you, or anything like that?
I'm good friends with Scoot.
Okay.
I met Scoot in a tryout quite a while ago, and we became friends. And he messaged me and I was like, look, we need to win these games. We've got these relegation games. Would you be interested in playing? I was like, sure, let's do it. So that's basically how it went down.
Nice.
Torok is a great guy. It was very nice meeting him. He's a great coach.
Good stuff. And like I said, obviously the form picked up. I think I remember from from watching those games, even before the relegation series, I think during the rest of the regular season, I don't remember exactly how many games you had played, but I think it was still even losing games. But I remember the team just looking a fair bit better overall. And then obviously, like I said, the relegations you guys end up winning. What was it like kind of even stepping into atmosphere? Because it must be a bit awkward. Like you're kind of coming into a team that's, I'd imagine, would have been really down at that point. And then you're sort of coming in and trying to sort of make your own place there while everyone else is, maybe the mental could have been gone or anything like that. What was the kind of atmosphere like in general?
It was very clear to me what the issues in the team were. So, in teams in general, it's very easy to fall into this downward spiral where, one bad game leads to another, and then you develop this sort of a negative mindset, and players sometimes don't really know what's going wrong, and sometimes it's got nothing to do with the gameplay. Sometimes it's just the mental of the players, and the problem with esports, with most coaches, and most, I'm not speaking about Torek, by the way, I'm speaking about like team atmospheres. The problem with most coaches and team owners and managers is they view esports the same way that they view other sports. So they see it as, well, yeah, you've got to practice this much, and you can't miss practice, and you've got to be very strict. And sometimes the best form of practice in a team is to just have the players bond together, just to have them get to know each other better. Because I've played in quite a lot of teams in my life, because I've played a lot in MENA, and every single team which had players that didn't like each other never would succeed. And every single team which had players who were very well connected to each other, then they would always succeed. And that's my opinion on esports. I believe that, players should be really good friends, and they should get to know each other really well. And I think that's kind of what the problem was. You had 5 players who came from 5 different cultures, and they, instead of seeing each other as, friends and brothers, because that's what you have to be on the Rift. You have to be a band of brothers. You have to be, when your teammate says, okay, let's do this, you can't think about it twice. You just have to do it. So that's kind of what the problem was, in my opinion. And that's usually what the problem is in most teams that don't succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, so especially at an ERL level, like most of the players at least have, most of the time they've got the mechanics, mostly pretty much all challenger or sort of grandmaster and things these days. So yeah, it makes sense that it's maybe a lot of time could be more sort of the mental side. And it's a good point, especially with VRLs too, where, if we usually class Europe as like the one region, but if you think it's, a lot of different countries, every country can have its own culture as well. Was that even when you were playing in sort of the MENA tournaments, was there even that kind of thing as well? Is there sort of quite different cultures around, with different teams you've been on with different players as well?
Didn't quite understand what you said. Sorry. Could you repeat that, please?
So I was saying, like, where you say about it's about a lot of the time the players bonding together, and I'm basically saying that with the ERLs, obviously it's all different countries in Europe, so it can be quite easy where maybe you've made a team's made a roster, but because they're from different countries, culturally they could actually be all from, quite different cultures really, even though it's all Europe. But it's different countries can be very different. So I'm basically saying, is that similar? Is there sort of similar issues even building rosters and things in the MENA tournaments, or is it that everyone's more sort of on the same page? Because obviously you've still got different countries that compete in those tournaments as well.
I think the thing about MENA is players are very, the cultures are usually very similar. So Tunisia is quite similar to Morocco, which is also basically all the countries in the North African region are very similar. And even the countries in the Middle Eastern region have a lot of similarities. So it's very easy to find things to connect to. So I've never personally seen any issues with Moroccan players playing with Tunisian players, for example, or Moroccans playing with Egyptians, or Egyptians playing with people from Saudi Arabia. However, I have seen problems with players from, Eastern Europe playing with players from Western Europe, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more things which draw people together in the in the MENA region, which helps them have things that they can connect to, because at the end of the day, their core values in general are very similar, and that allows them to be very well connected to each other.
Cool, very nice. And kind of before we move on and start maybe looking more towards the UKEL, just while we're still on the topic, is there any players in particular maybe that you've known from your time there that maybe it's worth even ERL teams looking into? Sort of any highlight players in particular that maybe flying under the radar?
From the MENA scene, there are a lot of very good players in the MENA scene, which I think are top tier level ERL players. Xigor is one of them. He's my old teammate. He was really good. This guy, he makes ridiculously good plays on like 80 ping, 70 ping. Like, his mechanics are insane. You've got players like Mirai. However, Mirai, I think he already got into a team in the Prime League, I believe. There's a lot of players. There's Mimic. He got Challenger with like 120 ping, and he makes really good plays, and he's very experienced and competitive. There's a lot of players in the MENA region which I think would be able to compete at a very high level in the top lane in almost every single role, basically. The MENA region, I think, is very stacked, and the thing is most of these players, what they lack is motivation. The reason why they quit, I've seen challenger players who, could be really, really good, quit because they're like, well, yeah, I've given up everything. I've tried my best to succeed, and I've gotten nothing from it. I get challenger, and I'm not even able to find any teams. So the problem is motivation. I think Riot needs to step it up a bit and investigate it further and try to, make actions and make steps towards either making a server or trying to implement some sort of an official league.
We'll see then. Obviously, for this split, then you've clearly made. It kind of sounds like a bit, when we're talking at least a bit off air, that it was a fairly conscious decision then to sort of come into the ERLs this split. And actually, when I was doing my research and checking your socials and things, I saw a post you'd made as well, basically saying that you were going to sort of step away from the Tunisian league and come over to the UK and sort of try your hand here and basically try and rise through the ERLs. So what sort of made that decision come about now? Why is that not something maybe you'd done so consciously before?
Well, the main reason why I decided to leave the MENA region, and to be completely honest and transparent with you, is just the level of toxicity there is really high and it's unregulated. So, for example, like if people are toxic in the UK scene, action, happens very quickly. People don't allow it to happen. Whereas if there is any form of toxicity in the MENA region, it just doesn't really, it goes unnoticed, basically. So yeah, like, I just decided that I wanted to step away after just a few things happened, and just some foolish stuff from what I see to be the community, which basically made me decide that, yeah, you know what, like, this is not worth it for me.
Okay. So then, obviously, you sort of gone to look into the ERLs then, and so how did you come about joining NerdRage then? So was there was it sort of hard to maybe get noticed even for trials and things coming from the MENA region? Because obviously, like you've had, that it was a short stint on Team Singularity, but even then in the NLC, you didn't, I think, look too out of place. Now we've obviously seen players like someone like Dragdar, for example, who's playing in the NLC now, who a couple of splits ago was in the UKEL. So it's at least a good place to start. But yeah, what was that kind of off season like then? Were you able to get some trials, or was it maybe, yeah? And how did you sort of end up coming on to NerdRage?
Well, I've had quite a few offers from a bunch of different teams. I've had offers in I could have just played in the UKLC if I wanted to. I've also had offers in I don't think I'm allowed to say what teams exactly, but basically I've had offers in like first division teams. And I decided that I wanted to play in the UKEL because one, Akles is in the team, and Akles is someone that I believe has a lot of potential, and I wanted to help him grow. And secondly, because right now I don't believe that I am at my highest level, so I don't want to go into a league and not give my best performance in the sense of what it deserves. So I don't want to go and play in like the NLC and then give up a performance which I don't believe is my real level, and then disappoint the team organization and the team owner and my teammates. So I prefer to play in a league which was a bit weaker and kind of develop my talent more slowly, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it makes perfect sense. Obviously, UKL, that's what it's for, really. It's a developmental league. So yeah, it makes perfect sense in that way. You say about Atlas as well that joined the team. Now, yeah, I think when I was having a look, I realized he was someone that I think, from what I could tell, I didn't see that you'd been on the same team before, but at least it looked like you played against him in sort of some of the tournaments in the MENA region. So yeah, was that someone that you knew for quite a while? Was it just someone that yeah, so did you like know him personally, or was it more just you've sort of played against him, you knew how good he was, and you just thought it would be someone that was good as a teammate?
Yeah, we played against each other quite a few times, and I've seen him in solo queue, and I knew that he was relatively new, and he was very hungry. So yeah, that's I didn't really know him personally until I joined NerdRage. Basically, that's when I met him.
So then once you sort of obviously met him and met the rest of the team as well, what were the initial hopes, or what are your hopes sort of maybe personally for the split then? Because obviously, like we say, UKL is developmental. The idea for the players is to get some sort of platform, and it may be a bit of a tricky one because of course you personally want to look good because you're trying to climb the ranks, but then as a team, of course you want to win. So there could be times maybe you're, especially as a mid laner as well, where you won't necessarily be played around, if you're doing certain comps and things like that, whereas mid laner usually you'd expect to be more the center of attention. So did you have to sort of think about what your actual personal goals are for the split as well?
The players that I'm playing with, I have a very high amount of respect for, and I trust them completely. I think that all of my players are very highly motivated, and they have a lot of room for improvement. But I think that their level is pretty good. So I trust them, and they listen to my calls really well. And sometimes, right now in this meta, it's not all about mid lane. I think mid lane has to play for his jungler rather than the jungler playing for him. So Malako is a very good player. I have a lot of respect for him, and I think we're going to do pretty well.
Very nice. So, what were the kind of expectations then as a team, just in general? Did you sort of have an idea where you sort of placed yourselves at least on paper? Because I just pulled it up to double check it. Even obviously there was a few of the casters I think had done a tier list where I think personally they put you as the second best mid laner, and then NerdRage in general, I think they put you sort of just about in the bottom pack. did you really have an idea? Because obviously a lot of players are, players that are coming into competitive even for the first time. So is it maybe a bit tricky to work out whereabouts you guys were as a team before the games had started, or did you just come into it thinking, that you were very confident and maybe we're just going for the top spot no matter what?
Well, I completely understand the fact that they put us in, they put my team like the bottom tier in their tier list, because at the end of the day, they don't really know who I am. They don't know who my jungler is. They don't know Yujian. They've only heard of Aklas. They don't know who Nabs is either. So they don't really know who we are, and I completely understand that. Now, I am confident in my team's ability to at least be top two. Obviously, I am aiming for that number one spot, but at the end of the day, what matters the most is how hardworking the players are and how committed they are to improvement. So if we lose, that just means that the other team wanted it more than we did. So, we'll see what happens. Personally, I'm not someone who ever tries to predict the future. I'm someone who believes that, even a Diamond 4 player can beat a Challenger player in tournaments. Tournaments are very different from solo queue. Anyone can beat anyone. And that's, for me, what the exciting thing about 5v5 really is. That, you can't really predict, or you can, but to a certain extent. So for me, I don't really know these players that I'm playing against, and I'm not going to make any judgments until I play against them.
Fair enough. Maybe start talk about some of the players you have played against now then. So obviously we had the first week of play. You guys are currently 2-0, joint top. And that started with Lucendi. And when I was watching, first of all, I wondered just what are your thoughts on them having played against them? Because when I watched that game, it kind of felt like whenever something was about to happen, it looked like Lucendi were always the ones sort of trying to do things. It looked like they were the ones sort of instigating stuff. And rather than necessarily being sort of proactive, it was almost like you guys were like reactive, but in sort of a good way. It looked like you just, whenever Lucendi were trying to do something, NerdRage pretty much just shut it down and sort of built up leads like that. So did it kind of feel like that for you? How did you really sort of rate playing against Lucendi?
Well, against Lucendi, so I went for a very bad turret dive, level 3, I think, or level 4. And the thing is, it was so stupid because if I just waited for the wave to crash, there would have been no counterplay to that play, and then the game would have looked very different. I think we had lane pressure in almost all of our lanes at all times, and their jungler seemed to be a player that just went for things. I wouldn't say in a very smart way, because looking at the replay, there were a lot of times where he should have been punished. And we knew that we didn't win bot side for like the first 10 minutes. So what we did is we just gave up 2 Drakes, and we're like, all right, we'll contest a 3rd Drake and we'll play around top side until then. So that's kind of just what we did. Now, since it was our first game, there were a lot of things that we did learn about that game. And we reacted in the sense of objective spawns. So basically what we did is we just farmed, and then whenever an objective spawned, which we had to contest and which we agreed to contest, we'd contest and would win the fights, because our comp at that time was stronger. So that's just kind of how we won that game.
Very nice. And yeah, that kind of makes sense what you say then, maybe with the jungler that was maybe going for stuff that could have been punished, because that's what it sort of felt like. Yeah, just as a viewer, it looked like they were maybe trying to set things up, and you guys just pretty much shut them down more or less every time. Coming into the second game then, that was against Munster, and actually Munster were one I think people had generally rated pretty highly. And actually Beartree, who you were up against in the mid lane, I think he's fairly recently role swapped from the top lane into mid, and then in at least in the tier list, was considered the strongest mid laner. And actually, he's someone that's been around the UK for a while as a top laner and has been, fairly good. So it's not too much surprise that it was quite a big expectation from him. And then you whipped out this Graves mid, which was admittedly not one that I'd seen before. Is that sort of was that a reaction pick in the moment, sort of to the comp or something? Was that something you've been working on?
I have a lot of picks that my team is aware of. That so basically what we do is we come up with a lot of scenarios and we're like, okay, if they do this, we'll do this. If they do that, we'll do this, and potentially we could do this. So the Graves mid was something that we did speak about, and I was like, all right, if this scenario comes up, we're gonna go Graves mid, and that's exactly what happened. I can't really say what the scenario is because I don't really want to give up our strategies, but yeah.
Okay. Well, then what were your thoughts just generally in that mid lane matchup with Bear Tree as well? Because it was someone that, like I say, has been a pretty decent top lane in the last few splits. And it was an interesting, because it's not often you see people really roll swap to mid. It's more like people roll swap away from mid, I find. So how did you find that just as sort of a 1v1?
It seemed like he didn't really know what he was doing against Graves. So I'm not sure if that's because he's not experienced enough in competitive mid lane, or if it's because he just hasn't played against Graves mid before.
Yeah, especially if you've not been there in the role that long, I can imagine. Yeah,
I want to play against him at least one or two more times before I make any judgments about him as a player, because he does have some good aspects about him as a player, but I can see a lot of clear weaknesses that he possesses.
That's fair enough. I wanted to say as well, because in that same game, I think Malacca was playing Karthus, and he was doing really well as well. Obviously, that's two picks that aren't really anywhere near the meta. I don't think. I've certainly not even seen much Karthus, let alone the Graves mid. So is that? Have you guys been planning stuff? And obviously, you don't have to go into certain picks detail. But yeah, have you been planning more sort of following general metas, or is it you just focus more on what works for you guys as a team, and in those sort of situations? Because obviously at this level of the UKEL, it's not obviously a top tier ERL, so it could be the fact that people playing on comfort is maybe more important than necessarily what's meant to be strong. So is there sort of some of that coming into it, or was it was the Karthus as well even something that was maybe just in the moment?
Well, I'm lucky enough to work with Mammal as a coach who has a lot of trust in us as well. So I'm someone that does not believe in the meta, and the reason why is because people follow the meta and they don't really know why they're following the meta. So for example, let's say one of the LPL comments. So people in like the Chinese teams, they have their own way of drafting, and let's say for example they draft Rek'Sai, and the reason why they draft Rek'Sai would be because they want to path like a specific way and make a very specific play, and if that play doesn't work, the comp doesn't really work. So people will follow that draft without really understanding why, and then it becomes meta, and people don't really know why. So in my opinion, following the meta, or at least the LPL / LCK, LCS, LEC meta, isn't very wise unless you really know what you're doing and you understand why these picks are being picked. And I'm someone that believes in creating your own meta and just doing what works. And I believe in comfort picks as well. So for me, I don't really like to follow the meta. I just pick whatever I think is best for me and what I will perform at the best, as long as it works with my team comp.
Yeah, I think that's something that probably, even not even just the fact that it's UKEL level, probably in a lot of ERLs where a lot of players probably aren't doing it sort of full time, when you've not got the time that obviously LEC players have to sort of just practice a lot. If there's a new pick that comes into meta, that obviously a full-on professional player has the time to just sit there and practice it to be able to play the meta stuff. When you're at an ERL level, it seems to make sense that it may be better to maybe focus more on the comfort side, because then you're not playing something that you're not used to, I suppose. And yeah, it looked like at least for you guys it worked out in that first game. Just one other thing I want to touch on in that game as well was there was a moment where, and it was like even like pre 20 minutes, where Munster let the Rift Herald take their inhib, and it was like the thing that you see like LS and things on his stream say about it, where like, you know, if it's earlier on in the game, you're better off losing the inhib because you just get the free waves and get the XP, and it helps to come back a bit. What are your thoughts on that, on that kind of sort of tactic? Because it's something that even though it's been sort of known, I think, for a while now, I don't see teams do it too often. And at least in that game, I think it really backfired. It may be the timing that they allowed it to happen, because it was like in the 19th minute they let the inhib go, and then a minute later Baron was up, and they were just like pushed right into the base in mid, and then you basically had a free Baron. So is that something you think is maybe not worth doing as much as people maybe sort of make it out? Because it seemed like something like a revelation when people started talking about it, but then in reality, is it something you think is actually that strong, or do you think there's just sort of specific times that could be useful?
It seriously depends. Like, it depends on your team comp, and it depends on how you play around it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem with them is it seemed like they didn't really know what they were doing in terms of when they gave up their inhib, because the whole point, right, is when you get inhib, you get mid prow. However, the problem is you kind of create like a permanent freeze under the enemy's base where you're constantly losing gold. So you're basically bleeding. So you have to make up for it. So you have to make value of your mid pro. Now, we did make value of our mid pro because we just got Baron. So that's kind of what they messed up, is they gave us what they should have done is they should have had Rise in the mid lane, and they should have just constantly let him push and just have him, you know, use his R to rotate in the side lanes, and they should have tried to get control. They didn't do that. They just let the minions push right into their base, and we had complete control over their map, and they just couldn't walk into Baron Pit, and then we just took Baron. Like, you only should give up inhib if Baron is not a threat. So I think post 20 minutes, inhib becomes valuable if you can actually take Baron. Pre 20 minutes, you should never ever take inhib. Because then you're going to lose, you know, a lot of gold, because you're just going to create this permanent freeze.
Yeah. Fair enough. And yeah, obviously, like I say, it didn't really work out for them, because it was funny. I think it even sort of took the casters by surprise. They sort of, you know, mentioned what they were trying to do, and they were saying, oh, you know, there's not a, I think they might have even said there's not a dragon up for a while, so, you know, they can sit there farming the waves, and then like suddenly Baron was there. It's like, oh well, you know, it's basically a free Baron for NerdRage now. I don't think it was even too long after that you guys pretty much just finished. So yeah, maybe it's a bit of a tricky one, I suppose. Maybe just a bit more practice on that. Now the next thing I was going to do is maybe go into some predictions for the upcoming week. That might be tricky though, if you're saying that that you don't really want to judge the players or the teams until you played against them. Are you able to at least take a crack?
All right, let's do it. I don't mind too much.
We'll start off with then, yeah, we'll just go through them one by one. So we've got X7 against Lucendi first. Might be a bit of an easier one, looking at least the scores so far. Obviously, X7 2-0, Lucendi 0-2. I felt Lucendi, not only in the game against you guys, but yeah, in their second game as well, it seemed again like they were trying to do stuff and maybe just getting punished for it. So, you know, at least they're sort of trying to be proactive, I suppose, is a plus. That could be something that maybe in a week or two, once they've had some more time to gel together, and maybe, you know, if the jungler is doing some fairly aggressive moves, maybe it will help once his team sort of knows how he plays, if that makes sense, and maybe be able to follow up on things better or something like that. So I feel like they're a team maybe could improve. I myself probably wouldn't see them beating X7, seeing as how good X7 has started. What do you reckon on that one?
There's no chance that X7 can lose, because Anonymous is a player who I think is actually so far seems to be one-dimensional, but he's very aggressive with his top laner. And that works because his top laner so far is better than basically almost all the other top laners in this league. So he can just be like, yeah, I'm just going to play around top lane the entire game and it will work, which it does. Lucendi has very weak laners from what I've seen. Their laners don't really have a good understanding of how waves work, so they can lose prior really easily. And Katsuo, I think, is a pretty decent player. Now I don't know what champions he can play well other than, Yasuo and Yon. But I know that like he can play well around his jungler because he moves around Anonymous really well. So his laner support, like the thing about Anonymous is he has support from all of his lanes. And he plays around his top laner really well. And I think, yeah, that basically just counters what Lucendi does. And Lucendi, basically, their jungler is he just walks around the map and he face checks a lot and he makes a lot of aggressive plays which are bad. He doesn't make good aggressive plays. And I think that's just going to get punished by Anonymous. Okay. Like either he's going to gank and he's going to lose most of his jungle, or he's just going to get invaded and die by like minute 4. It's going to be one of those. I don't see a way that Lucendi can win.
Okay. And do you see then X7 as sort of your main competition at the moment then? Obviously they're the other team joint top.
Yeah, I think I just got to try and figure out like their main weaknesses. And, I have a certain level amount of respect for Anonymous. I think he's really good. I like his confidence. It's really good. And I just want to see more from him, really. I've so far he's been playing in a one-dimensional way, but I'm pretty sure he can be adaptive, but I just want to see to what extent. So I can see some weaknesses in his gameplay, but I just want to see him play more before I decide on what we should do as a team with my coach.
Yeah. Let's see them. Right, so that was game 1 then. The game after that is Munster Rugby Gaming against Nox. Munster, obviously, like I said earlier, were one that people had backed pretty well before anything started, and they actually started 0-2, which is obviously well off the pace so far. Yeah, what did you just make of them in general then, as a team? Do you see them as being one that could sort of pick it up, and yeah, what do you think?
So far, they've been very indecisive as a team. So there are a lot of situations where they don't know what to do. And it's clear to me that they don't have someone who is guiding them through what is supposed to happen throughout the game. So I can see that, yes, Beatree is a player that he seems to be the guy that's like, all right, guys, let's do this, let's go. Like, he's the one that flashed onto my Carthus. So it seems like he's the one initiating things. So it honestly depends on the level of the mid laners that play against them. If he plays against players that can match him in terms of strength, or junglers that decide to shut him down, I feel like their team kind of somewhat falls apart because I think he's their strongest point. But yeah, like they don't seem like a team which has anything which makes them stand out yet. But like I said, that's the thing about 5v5, right? Like things change and teams adapt, and it's really hard to make judgments because at the end of the day, some people can just improve really quickly. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. That I'm basically just judging based on what's happened so far.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I think their game against Demise as well, I think they looked at least a little bit better. Jojo in the top lane, I think he was playing set on that game, had a pretty good game. So it looks like there's some pieces there. It's maybe just a case of them, yeah, especially if it's like shot calling. Once maybe they've got a bit of a clear mindset of who is in charge and sort of rallying behind him really. Then yeah, maybe one that could improve. They're against Nox though, and I'd probably give it to Nox from week 1. Nox as well, I think, played against Demise, and they had. I thought they looked just generally a bit more coordinated, to be honest, and their solo lanes actually play pretty well as well. So we were saying like maybe Beartree and Jojo could be the stronger points on Munster. I think. Yeah, I think for Nox their solo lanes look pretty good as well. So it might not even be one that Munster could necessarily get an angle like that. Yeah, what did you made of Knox then, and who would you pick in that game against Munster?
I don't think Nox is that good. In my opinion, I think, like I said, in terms of individual skill, I don't think they're that great. And in terms of team synergy and like knowing how to play around objectives and how to set up vision, it seems to be pretty weak as well. I don't think Nox has any clear strengths, whereas other teams have at least some strengths. So, for example, like you said, there was Beartree and Jojo that their team could play around, that Munster could play around. And on X7, there's Anonymous and Raider, and Ketsu is good as well. I don't really know that bot lane, so I can't really speak for them. But Nox was the only team that I saw where I would watch them and I'd be like, all right, well, I don't really see what stands out consistently. There was nothing clear to me.
Is that one you give to Munster then?
Definitely, yeah. I don't think that Munster. If Munster loses, then something went severely wrong.
We'll see then. The game after that, then we've got yourselves against London Academy. Now I've gone for NerdRage, and that's not just because you're here. Obviously, you guys look really strong in week 1. But yeah, what were your thoughts on London Academy from their first week?
London Academy.
I think especially
they seem like a slightly better version of Nox. So basically everything I said about Nox, but they're just a tiny bit better. I don't think they have any clearly good players, and I just don't think that they're slightly better, and they do at least have decent team synergy. So maybe that could carry them, through it. So maybe if they draft really well, they might have a chance. But like if they int their draft, there should be no way that we can lose. Or if we don't int our draft, like if drafts are even, I think they can't win. Like at least 95%.
Okay, I think they looked a bit weird. So I feel like they looked quite different in their first 2 games. So the first game was against London United, which they lost, and that one I kind of saw it like it was weird because they seemed like it was like more or less level, and then they just, as soon as there was team fights happening, they basically just were losing every team fight. But they had like Galio, Rumble, Rel, which seemed like it would be a good sort of team fight combo, really. It seemed like a wombo combo kind of team. But then as soon as it actually came to team fights, that's where they lost, really. They lost a few team fights in a row and that was it. But then their other game was against Lucendi, and maybe this could be because Lucendi didn't start too strong. But no, London Academy I thought looked quite different against Lucendi and looked pretty good. So maybe one to see, once there's been a few more games, and maybe against the likes of NerdRage that are on form at the moment. Maybe that'll be easier to sort of work out what level they're at. So yeah, I'd guess I'll give that one for NerdRage. I'll put you down for that as well. And then the last game of that first day is Demise against London United. So London United, obviously, like I said, beat London Academy in the big London derby, and then they lost to X7, but then that could be one as well where obviously X7 has started quite good, so that's maybe not much of a slight on London United. So yeah, where would you see them and Demise? How do you sort of rate both these teams?
That's a good one. So I actually think that game it's hard to tell. That's the only game on the list where I'm like, I don't really know who's gonna win. Both of those teams are pretty decent. Obviously, I haven't seen their top laner so far on anything apart from the Rengar. So I kind of want to see what happens if someone decides to ban it. I'm not sure why they haven't. That was very interesting to me, to say the least. But I just want to see. I'm quite curious to see what happens on that game. Like I said, I have respect for both of those teams. I think both of those teams are like, so in my opinion, X7 is like S plus, and then you have A tier teams, which are like Demise and London United. I'm not sure what other teams are. I can't remember them off by heart. But yeah, just based on the teams that I remember, those teams, and then you've got Nox and Lucendi on like the I'd say B tier.
Mm-hmm. Where's
And
NerdRage then?
I don't know yet. I don't want to rate ourselves because I genuinely do not know yet.
Mm-hmm.
I would say at least S, maybe under X7 right now. And I think the thing about our team is there's so much information that we have that we need to improve upon. And it depends on if we're able to improve upon it fast enough or not.
Mm-hmm.
For me to basically place us up there with X7 or not. We'll see.
Cool. Who would you give that one to then, if you had to choose Demise or London United?
It's a good question. Demise or London United?
I've gone London United, but then yeah, to be fair, it was quite similar for me, and it was kind of one where I wasn't too sure on either team yet, to be honest.
Demise seems a bit more decisive in terms of their gameplay, but London Demise, it seems like they have better laners, whereas London, it seems like they play better in team fights as a team. So it really depends on it depends on if London falls really behind in lane or not. If they fall really behind before like 15 minutes, then they'll lose. Else they'll win. That's what I think. I think if the game is even by 15, London wins it.
Yeah. Shall we say London then for you?
Let's say London. It's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
But I would say like 55% London. I'll give them like an extra 5%.
Nice. Moving on to day 2 then. This might be a bit easier now that we've sort of discussed each team pretty much. So the first game is Nox against Lucendi. I'm guessing then, based on what you said before, maybe Lucendi, you probably have to lose that one, would I guess? Maybe a Nox win.
I've got no idea. I think it depends on their development. The thing about teams is some teams can improve so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's possible for a team to go from B tier to S tier in like the matter of 1 to 2 weeks. So it really depends on their level of development as a team. But from what I've seen, it's really hard to tell. I think Lucendi should win against Nox, just judging from what I've seen so far.
Interesting.
I sincerely hope I don't offend anyone here. But like for me, I don't want to lie either.
Yeah.
Like I'm just gonna say what I think.
I don't think you've been too harsh. I actually had Lucendi as well in my notes beforehand, just because I don't know. Even maybe haven't got quite the eye for which of the players are good or not. But yeah, just seeing that they were at least trying to be proactive. I thought eventually they'll a couple of those ganks and things will come off and they'll get a lead. So I've gone for Lucendi on that one. After that then was London United against Munster. I feel like this could be quite hard actually as well. Obviously, like if we just gone purely off of week 1, obviously you'd give it to London United. But then, like I said, Munster looks like they've got some pieces that could turn out being pretty good for them. So it's a bit of a tricky one. I went with London anyway, just off of the form. I feel like that's maybe the easier one to go for now. But yeah, what do you reckon on that one?
Actually, I would give it to Munster to win that one, just because of it really depends on their draft. If like they don't troll their draft, like if both drafts are even, I would give it to Munster to win that game. I think them as a team, based on their players, I expect that Munster should be able to develop faster than London because most of the players in London are rookies. And you've got players like Beatrice and Jojo who, in my opinion, from what I know about them, are very self-critical. So I think that if they do know where to point the fingers, then it should be Munster that wins that game, theoretically.
Cool. And then we've got, after that, yourselves again, this time against Demise. I've gone for NerdRage again, because obviously you guys look pretty good in week 1. I presume I could put you down for a NerdRage as well on that one. But yeah, what do you make of, at least of just the matchup in general? Do you feel like they could maybe spring a surprise or two, or are you fairly confident in that one?
I think they should be our hardest opponent yet before we face X7. Personally, I love a challenge. I think it's going to be a good challenge for us as a team. And however, I expect that we should win. I don't see that they have anything crazy that they're going to pull out, which will, get us by surprise. And we're like, what the heck just happened? So, cool. Unless they come up with some really insane strategy, I think it should be us that wins it.
Stuff. And then the last one I think is probably one of the easy ones to guess then, is X7 against London Academy. I've given it X7. Obviously you've said that you'd see them as the 1S plus team at the moment. I think this one maybe there could be a chance of an upset, given that London Academy, they haven't looked consistent haven't been across the first 2 games at least, which obviously isn't a huge sample size, but they haven't looked like they're clearly bad or clearly good. So it's maybe one that could be a bit of a surprise there. But yeah, what do you make of the matchup in general?
From what I've seen from the junglers so far, most of the junglers in this league is they do not have the confidence to match Anonymous. So Anonymous is very confident, and he goes for plays which are risky, and he just goes. He doesn't think twice about it because he believes in himself. Now, it seems like most of the junglers, when they play against Anonymous, they just think to themselves, this guy's high elo. He probably knows what he's doing better than me. So I've just got to, just sit back and, just do what my team wants me to do. That's what it seems like they're thinking. So I think that most of the junglers in this league, they're just too afraid to be able to match Anonymous. So until a team finds the confidence and the belief in themselves to be able to be like, yeah, look, let's just actually watch his gameplay and see what he does exactly. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're faker or if you're bronze. If you have a certain amount of items and you click buttons, the opponent will die, right? So I think they should just watch him, see what he does, and just develop a strategy around him. Because so far, no one knows what they're doing. So I don't think any team will be able to beat Anonymous. I think the only team that can potentially beat Anonymous is Anonymous. I say Anonymous when I'm supposed to be saying X7. The only team that's supposed to be able to beat X7 is us, unless X7 completely trolls their draft. So we'll see what happens.
Very interesting. There we go then. We've got all the predictions down. We'll see how it plays out. And yeah, I think at that point we've just ticked over an hour. We can maybe start to think about wrapping up. One thing I did want to touch on as well before we finish the episode, more of sort of UKEL related. Obviously today, I don't know, a lot of people probably would have seen the LEC talent got announced for the summer split. And as well as obviously, a fair few of the NLC guys getting in there. One of those was Jamada, who obviously started his casting career in the UKEL and was casting the UKEL literally, I think, about a year ago. So, huge congratulations to him. And obviously it shows that it's not even just player development. Obviously UKEL, there are people working behind the scenes and obviously on screen and things. So yeah, really good story. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up then. Thanks for joining us, Gaaloul. Good
Thank
luck.
you very much.
Good luck with the rest of the
Thank
split.
you very much.
And,
Before I go,
yeah, sure.
Jamada was someone that I've met around a year ago when I was going to play with Wind and Rain. And he was someone who's very, very nice to me. And he helped me out in quite a lot of things. And I'm very happy to see that he has succeeded in his ambition. And I wish him the best.
Definitely. And yeah, on that note, then I think we can wrap up. So, yeah, anyone that's been watching on Twitch, obviously I had a fair few people in the chat and everything. Do feel free to drop a follow on Twitch. Of course, it's not only us with the NTS podcast that are streaming on here. Of course, the main thing is the UKEL, and we can just have a quick look as well on what's coming up. So, if we look ahead to the start then of week 2. Obviously, we've gone through the games a little bit, but here you go. See them on the screen. So we've got, starting on Thursday, X7 against Lucendi, followed by Munster Rugby against Knox, then London Academy against NerdRage, and then Demise against London United. So that'll be from Thursday at 6 p.m. We can have a little look at the standings as well after week 1. There we go, Gaaloul. We see your NerdRage up there. Top at least alphabetically, I think, for now, ahead of X7. So that will be an interesting one, especially when you guys come head-to-head. And then there we go. To see the 1-on-1 pack in the middle. London United, Knox, Demise, and London Academy. And then Lucendi and Munster at the bottom there, still looking for their first wins. And, well, I've gone to the wrong thing there. There we go. Now we're back on screen. So yeah, obviously do follow the UKEL to check that out. Otherwise, if you're watching back later on, either on YouTube or Spotify or Google Podcasts, a lot of them, of course, you can follow the podcast on there as well. And I suppose the only last one is you can follow us on Twitter directly. Our Twitter handles are both on the screen. And yeah, that'll pretty much do. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.